Good morning, everybody. Early afternoon. It's so nice to see you guys, and we have such a nice small group here with us. I don't know if the way that you're viewing, you're able to see all of the participants. It's so nice to be able to see people. But for the moment, since it's 11:01 and you guys are right on time, I thought it would be really nice to go around and just introduce ourselves. You've made it to IVA's Fall 2020 online bell schedule question and answer, and your questions are so important. They are really going to help us serve your kids well and your family well. The people who are hosting this for you is myself, Jackie Bryant. I'm the principal at IVA, and I'll allow our other hosts to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amos Mikaele. I'm the counselor here at IVA.
Hi, families. I am Jordan Altmeyer. I'm the office supervisor at IVA.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia, and I am the admin assistant here at IVA.
So it's really, really nice that we are in a meeting and that you're able to see the faces of Mr. Mikaele and Ms. Altmeyer and Ms. Chiboon. Especially because Jordan and Julia are the main points of contact for our family. So you will probably connect with them first. And because we have a small group here today, if you can, I don't know if the settings are set up for you. I would love it if you can unmute yourself for a second in any random interrupt each other order and tell us your name and your child's name, what grade they are. That would be wonderful. Bibi, I saw you unmuted yourself already. If that is your name, would you introduce yourself for us?
Yes, my name is Bibi Beltran. My daughter Phoebe will be an incoming 6th grader, and we're excited because we were waitlisted and we were heartbroken, but we heard a lot of great things about how fast the goes, and so yay.
Oh, good. Welcome. Thank you, Bibi. Who's next? Jenny.
Hi, guys. I'm Jenny Marvin. My daughter Amanda is going to be an incoming 8th grader. So we've been in person for 2 years, or 1 3/4, and so we'll and then I probably will have another one coming in the following year. So.
Oh, I didn't even know that. That's so exciting. Thank you. Good morning. Nice to see you. Chandrika?
Chandrika Williams, and I also have my husband Derek Williams is also in this call. Our son Jordan Williams will begin his 8th grade year. This will be his 3rd year at IVA, and he's really excited to start again.
Nice to see you here. Anyone else? I see Linda is here. Linda, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Linda, nutritional service coordinator, and I'm just going to listen in and get caught up with all of you and see some new faces.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Kevin and Molly and Lindsay. If you want to introduce yourselves, I'll give you a moment to do so. Tell us who you are, your child's name, and what grade they're in.
Says Molly can't access her mic.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't even checking the chat. Thank you. The chat's important. Well, good morning and welcome. We know that I just feel like I'm parroting everything that everybody else says right now. We know these are unprecedented times, that we're all trying our best, that we as educators at this point in the summer are always itching to get our students back because it is the purpose of what we're doing. So we're really, really glad to be back with your kids soon, to the extent that we get to be with them. A couple housekeeping items is that you are generally on mute, and that's by default. And please do use the chat. That's a good reminder for me to pull open the chat. But we have our counselor, Amos Michele, and Jordan and Julia. So if at any time we need to interrupt to answer a question from the chat, please feel comfortable doing so. And we are also recording this in case there's anything that we can just cut and clip and send out to our families that is helpful. Also, we really value your questions. I think in the pursuit of learning, questions are one of the most important things. And so we want to make sure that we're getting your questions correct. Before we begin, Amos, will you explain this part?
Yeah, so before we get into the mix of the schedule, I think it's good for us to sort of slow down and take some time to reflect on our thoughts and our feelings at this moment. And the question that I would like for us to input in the chat or to answer in the chat is to share one thought or one feeling for yourself or your child that you have about returning to school. So in our chat, if you can share one thought or one feeling for yourself or your child that you have about returning to school, and then we'll give a few minutes for families to put in their answers, and then once everyone is, or most of us has done so, we'll go ahead and read some out. So share one thought or one feeling for yourself or your child that you have about returning to school. And Jackie, I'm going to go ahead and add that in the chat just in case. Oops. Just in case people aren't able to hear or see.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So Julie, I see that Julie just joined us. We are currently answering an opening question on the chat, and the question is, or the opening question is, to share one thought or feeling for yourself or your child that you have about returning to school.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can we read a couple of those? How about Amos, you and Jordan, can you just read one or the other, and then we'll move on to our schedule.
I see Derek says that he's glad that we have options.
Greg had two, one for himself and then one for Asher, and so I'll read both. For himself, it was, we were so excited to be at IVA and it's frustrating to be unable to go. And then for their child Asher, we feel so bad for him. He hasn't been in a class since May and hasn't seen friends. And then he says, I know we're great, but not that great.
Lindsay shared that she's grateful to have safe options and flexibility.
Chandrika, I am excited to know that IVA will continue to provide rigorous learning for my child, even through the platform of distance learning.
Molly said that she's excited to attend in person when safe to do so.
BB says, my one feeling I have for my daughter returning to school is sadness. She was looking forward to entering a new environment and meeting new people. And she's such a people person that this made both of us sad despite the circumstances.
And Jenny shared, we're hoping to reestablish personal connections between students.
And Julie Keen Leavenworth, I am hopeful and happy for school to be back. I'm hoping for hybrid plan.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that we are all hoping for in person as soon as it is safe to do so. So we are going to share the online bell schedule model. And before we get into your questions, I think it's really helpful to, and I imagine that, I mean, you're here because you read the newsletter and you got the link, so you're very savvy. But you've probably looked at the newsletter, the bell schedule, and had thoughts. The prompt that we're asking for you to do, again in the chat if you can, is what do you see about this schedule? Just anything that is something that you see, and we'll just start with that for just a moment. We're going to ask, what do you see, what do you think, and what do you wonder about, as a way to guide us towards, sort of as a community, looking at it. So what are the things that you see in the bell schedule? And you can just throw any of those into the chat. Oh, good question. Thank you. Okay, I see longer class hours. Yay, and I wonder about the Monday schedule. Good. And will this be the schedule for all grades? Good. I see how much time they'll be spending in front of a computer, and what is advisory? Good, good,
Office hours are scheduled right after classes. I'm wondering about Mondays.
good. How do IEPs fit into the schedule? Excellent. Okay. I wonder if students will be able to ask questions and have office hours during independent learning time if they have questions. That is a great question. It's a good wonder. So we're going to collect your questions, see if there's any themes in the questions, and then try to answer whatever questions that we can automatically. I'm sure that you saw some of this information in the newsletter. This bell schedule was really a response to what we learned in the spring. So one of the main elements of the schedule is longer class sizes. And in those longer class sizes, we want to implement what in the spring was really difficult to implement, which is discussion. We want more questions and inquiry. We found that in the spring, 45 minutes allowed teachers to give content, and that isn't the way that our model is set up. We want students to understand things deeply, and the way to do that is for them to be participating. So if we're talking for a moment, and maybe you can, and Mr. Michele, copy questions, but maybe help me by what sort of order of conversation we should go. And if I'm thinking about the long class sizes, I think there were some questions in there about that. I think that one thing that the longer class sizes allow us is for the support for IEPs within the class. One of the things that IVA's model has is push in to class support so that students are connected. And one of the benefits of the way we were able to use Zoom last year, longer class sizes, is that in a class where we have more time to discuss, there can be a question posed and students can be sent into small breakout rooms. And in small breakout rooms for students who are academically at risk or who have IEPs, will carefully place their support services in those breakout rooms. So there'll be a teacher, an RSP teacher or an instructional aide that's able to make sure that the conversation doesn't just fizzle out, that there's continued facilitation. One of the things that is difficult for students in the breakout rooms last year that we're really working to support is that when kids went into breakout rooms last spring, they would turn their cameras off and go on mute and work on the shared document they had in common, but it was like conversation stopped. And so what we are working in creating expectations at the very beginning of this year, and actually through advisory in addition to the first week of classes, is how to stay connected even if all we have is this online learning format that we're doing. And that means we are going to have students with their cameras on all the time, that we expect them to be involved in discussion. I think it's going to be a bit exhausting, the amount of time that we're on Zoom together. So I'll look at the questions, and then Mr. Michele or Jordan, Julia, can you add to whatever I'm sort of saying? I'm trying to keep them in categories as I respond, but this is the schedule for all grades. We are working on, now that we have a bell schedule identified, we're working on the schedule of classes, and we're looking forward to, in 2 weeks' time, is it? Being able to give to families which class, if we look at the bell schedule, which class is our students going to see block 1 Tuesday morning at 8:20 a.m. Which class is their second class, which class is their third class. So all of that specific is coming in 2 weeks' time as we put it together. Is there anything that I'm missing in that? I wanted to jump to something about office hours or advisory, but are there any questions that you're seeing that can be addressed there that I haven't addressed?
I can help give some answers on what is advisory and attending office hours. If there's no clarification needed.
Could you start with office hours, since that's connected to their block schedule day?
Yeah. So office hours, when we're back in school face to face, office hours is a 20-minute period where students have the ability to go to any class that they need additional support for. So if it's needing to clarify, questions that they had in class, or if they have assignments that they had questions on, or they needed to finish a test, they would go to that specific class for that subject to get support. In the online setting, we learned that in the spring, in the springtime, we had office hours set aside for students to log in to certain classes, and it was a different schedule for every class. And sometimes there was mix-ups with what the schedule was. So what we decided to do for the fall was to have the students have their office hours immediately following their class. So for example, if your student has block 1 math, they have office hours right after that class for that for math specifically. Before it was like you can go to any office hours, but now it's going to be specifically focused for the class that they just attended. So there's no need to transition or have another Zoom link. They'll just stay in the office hours, and it's not mandatory. If students do not need to have any clarifying questions or work on anything, they do not have to stay in office hours. So that's how office hours will be tracked and attended immediately following the class.
Yeah, and I would add that it's not mandatory, but I do imagine that this is where a teacher is going to say, Amos, I saw that you had some questions. I don't think I was able to answer them. Or Jordan, I just want to check in with you before you go. So while things are not mandatory in that block of time after their class is done, this is another opportunity for differentiation and support for students. And I think what the online bell schedule is allowing us is so much more time of this, because in the school year, we're able to put only 20 minutes. And so kids have to choose which of their 6 classes they go to. And there's always some high competition with math, because math is the class that almost all, the largest majority of kids need to attend. It's a different subject. So we're excited about the office hours. It's not a required time. As you have other questions about office hours, throw it in there. And I did see a question about Monday's schedule. We can talk about advisory in just a moment. One of the things that we're glad, actually, let's just talk about advisory and then we'll talk about the possibilities of Monday. And please, again, Jordan, Julia, if you see questions related to what we're trying to address, please let me know. So on Monday, the school day begins at 8:20 a.m. again. And students need to log in. I saw a question just now about attendance. Attendance is going to be taken on our student information system. LBUSD's is Parent View, but ours is called Illuminate. And teachers are taking roll, and that lets us know if students are attending classes. We're really excited also about a new communication service that we'll have for our families, where families can select to receive a notice if their child is not in the class. And especially in the first couple weeks of school, we know that there's going to be a lot of technical needs. And so our office staff is going to be supporting that to make sure that students are in class. But advisory kicks off our week on Monday for 1 hour. Advisory is this protected time, really where curiosity is allowed its own space. Because we know that class subjects are controlled to some extent. There's still big questions, there's still discussion. But if a child is really, really interested in like conspiracy theories, one of their classes is not really going to be addressing conspiracy. Or do dogs feel emotion? Are they really man's best friend? The kinds of questions that our middle schoolers like are super interested to figure out and discuss. It's afforded that time in advisory. Advisory is a smaller group of students assigned to one staff member. And the goal of advisory is that they would have a safe place where they can set goals for themselves. So this can be an advocacy check-in for the staff member and the student. How are you doing in your classes? With a small group of kids that are assigned specifically not to be the best friends. So that's a support service. When we get into a couple weeks into the school year, then that's where advisors guide students to ask big, just curious questions. So I was talking to a parent the other day and she said, will clubs continue? And last fall, we tried to get our students to continue clubs. Clubs are student-led activities. And all but one that I've heard of fizzled right out because kids were sick of being on the computer and they wanted to interact in a different way. But advisory is this protected space for the social emotional support of students, for the curiosity to be developed, and to have one adult who is looking out for just them in a small group of kids. So that's our advisory program. We started Monday with advisory to get kids out of bed, to get all of us out of bed. I've been really enjoying getting to choose when I get out of bed, but we want the school year to have some structure to it. The independent learning that is after advisory and for the rest of the day for students, that's a long amount of time. For teachers, this is when they would be grading, providing feedback to students. So yes, there is going to be communication with students, but not in a structured way as there would be during the rest of the school week. Independent learning also may be this place where we can provide additional support for students who are at academic risk. So it may be small groups meeting, and this is things that we're working out. But this is the day of the week that is the most unstructured and that I think families might have the most questions about. The day ends for our staff with professional development. One thing that we are working out is last year, I think one of the benefits that we had was giving a week at a glance to our families. On one document, here's all the assignments that teachers are assigning, here's all the grades, so that families didn't have to get their kid to go look in every Google Classroom and figure it out. We're trying to provide one space. So we're trying to do that again, and hoping that on the Monday, we can have that set for the week and sent out to families. Are there more classes about Monday, or what is sort of not answered about Monday?
Jackie, there was a question in the chat. I answered it kind of in the chat, but would love to hear from you. It is asking how many kids are in advisory.
Yeah, well, I don't know that yet. We are trying to figure out, normally in advisory, we have volunteer advisors. And our volunteer advisors help us keep the size of students down low. And we just don't know if it would be cruel to have volunteer advisors who can't be in continual conversation and training with us in the same ways. So the advisory groups are going to be between 10 and 15 kids. And those kids will meet every Monday morning for the entire school year. And we traditionally have 6th and 7th graders in the same group, and we keep 8th graders in their own group because 8th graders are thinking about the transition to high school. 8th graders that are a totally different adolescent development stage than 6th and 7th. Jordan, is that something like you responded? Did you have, is there more that I can answer there?
I think it was similar. I was saying in the past, it has been about 8 to 10, but that we're still processing what that will look like online.
Yeah. Good. What other questions can we, I'm gonna look at this page. How do kids attend office hours? Maybe we answered this, but students will be logged into their classes and they just won't leave their class. They'll be on the camera and they'll stay if they want to stay, or their teacher or their parent has requested that they stay in office hours. Office hours is going to be a great time for teachers just to double check with all the kids that need double checking that they've got it, that their questions are answered. Although I'm really glad for the longer classes because we want questions answered in class. We want the time and space for that. If students are able to ask questions and have office hours during independent learning time if they have questions. We're not really sure about what this is going to look like on Monday on the student learning time. We also know for our incoming 6th grade families, we also know that when our 6th graders are brought into IVA, there's a lot of sort of like cultural shift for them. We want all of their questions. And then there can be a tendency for 6th graders to be like super unsure because more freedom is given to them in, I don't know, having an argument instead of like a structure that they have to abide by and they know it's checked off. So our 6th graders always have more questions than the rest, and we want to give them all the space to have those questions. So some teachers might decide on a Monday, I am going to have a meeting that I'll invite my students to. And some teachers might say, it's better for me if we just communicate in the chat on Google Classroom. But whichever way that is, we're going to try to make it very clear to parents and have it be published in one space so that you don't have to remember which one of your teachers has opportunities, which one of them wants the Google Classroom. We know it can be quite messy to jump from having one teacher where the communication might even be hard to follow to 6 different teachers. And that's what we're going to look out for. Amos, anything to add to that?
No, I was looking at the question about mandatory cameras, and I guess I just wanted to give some feedback on that because I know in the spring our staff and faculty realized that it really helps when students have their cameras on, seeing their faces, interacting with them. So I think that's something where our teachers have been processing on how to implement the need for cameras to be mandatory or the use of it. So I think that's what we're leaning to.
Yeah, and we will be talking with students about under what circumstances should your cameras be off. So it's going to be like conversations that are going to be had. One of the things that's so difficult in being distanced from kids over the camera is that a lot of the communication that teachers have with their kids to know if they're doing good is looking at them. Like, how are you looking? Is your head down? Do you just look sad or not connected or distracted? I'm really grateful for our teachers who, after Zoom meetings, contact students and say, it just looked like you were a little off today. How's it going? Not only that, but we have our office staff, where our teachers mark down how students are sort of engaging in class, and our office staff can follow up and talk to parents or talk to students and just say, like, how's it going? What supports do you need? So I think that we will be requiring cameras on, but talking about it, because it's a whole new sort of like cultural expectation that we're navigating together. On a side note, whenever we do get to come back in person, and if the social distancing is required, masks are required, we were talking about having kids and families sign a contract that says, I will always keep my mask on. I will clean and disinfect my space after. Like, we were like, what are these new requirements that we have to do in these new settings? And so one that we realized in the spring was that cameras on is a big one into that. The other question about IEPs, I have not talked with Long Beach Unified yet. They provide our support services for students. So they might have a model of special education support that they expect of their RSP teachers, and I don't have answers to that yet, although I am scheduled to talk with our RSP teacher later today, so I hope to get more information. And as I have that information, I will make sure to include it in the newsletter, because I'm unclear about the district sort of initiatives for special education support. Okay, what other questions?
I think a lot of these bullet points you addressed already, but mandatory Zoom. Oh, sorry, about Monday.
There's one about, is there time for students to socialize during breaks or another time? So our teachers, when we have block scheduling, and it's almost 2-hour-long classes when we're in person, our teachers are really good at implementing brain breaks within the class. So that's just like, sometimes they dance together, sometimes they just stretch. Sometimes, especially for our 8th grade students, it's like, all right, 5 minutes to just talk with each other. So I think that sort of socializing teachers want to build into the structures of the class, but I think are also going to be aware that even 80 minutes, I think it could be longer, but you know, Zoom burnout, but even 80 minutes will need breaks in there for socializing. But I'm really unsure of how well we are going to be creatively able to quickly implement things like clubs. Those were really hard to support and maintain this last spring. I also kind of like, it's probably not helpful to say this, but last spring or before quarantine happened, we discovered roller rinks as a school. And to add that to our dances, like, I can't wait till we get back in person, because we are going to be roller skating together. We're going to be dancing, and we're going to look forward to a lot of that. And then I think, like, as families see what other schools are doing, or if you're the kind of person that's like aware of things out there in the world, if there are socialization things that you find out about, please let us know, send us information so that we can sort of figure out what is possible. Also, our PTA is amazing. They're always wonderful, and they have one of their goals as ways to connect families and connect students to each other. That's why they sponsor our dances and things like that. But I wonder if our PTA also might be really interested in taking this on. I see, thank you, Julie. I see, how will PE be handled? So the CDE has now, in the quarantine time, has said no physical education is required, no instructional minutes in physical education. But we're maintaining physical education as a class, first because for us it is also an academic class. Our PE teachers might not sit on Zoom for 80 minutes. But they might have students do a certain number of workouts and then check in at this time during our class, and then take your heart rate at this time. So I think PE classes especially are going to be very flexible. I don't know if your kids are going to have to take a shower after their PE classes. I mean, they're middle schoolers, so they probably will just like keep slogging through, take a shower when their parents require it or something like that, unless they're really clean. But does that answer the question for PE? I don't have a very clear answer, but I think it'll be very distinct from other classes. Anything to add to that, you others? We are having the students build our school building in Minecraft for education. Super cool. This will work as a project, but once build a vertical meeting space for socializing. Thank you. That was to me privately. I'm sorry. I'm just reading things. Thank you, Derek. There's cool things out there. I think we're really flexible, and as a staff, we like to learn new things. Grades are an interesting question. We are going to have grades, but I think that last year, especially as the teachers and staff were thinking about the sort of inequitability between students, there are some students whose both their parents are working all day long. And so the sort of support they'd have in person is not the support they can get at home. Or there are some students who have a parent who is going to be able to sit next to them all day long. And in both cases, it feels really inequitable. So we're going to be carefully approaching grading this year. But I believe that grades are the expectation in the state of California, and we want to provide some form of feedback to our families. We also want it to be very fair. I think that IVA's grades have been more rigorous than other middle schools than I'm aware of, because our curriculum is about a deep understanding of content. But I think that we would not make decisions to grade more rigorously to any detriment of a student who's not receiving support. So that's, again, I feel like not a clear answer, but we will give more information as we have more information about grades. What else? Oh, one thing I remembered, I saw something about homework and that it was a lot last year. And again, some students, it's totally fine with them and they're bored and their parents are like, give us more. They need to have something to do all day long. And some students are like, this is overwhelming, plus I'm not motivated. And I just, a lot of students were suffering from some feelings of sadness from not being around people all day. So homework was a bit overwhelming for a lot of our students. The way that we have the structure right now, students are in classes for about 3 hours throughout the week. So in their math class, they'll be on Zoom for about 3 hours with their teacher. There's additional time for office hours support. We expect that every class would give about 1 hour of assignments to do outside of class. So if you have 6 classes, that's 6 hours of assignments to do outside of class on a 5-day week. That means that on Monday, your students will probably have some assignments to be doing. I know for our literature and composition classes, it's an expectation of 20 minutes of reading a night for the novels that they read. So there will continue to be some outside of class, but our teachers and our staff are really going to be checking in with kids about how overwhelmed they're feeling, like constant checking in and feedback about that, so that we're not overwhelming kids in an already sort of overwhelming situation. Okay, what other questions do you have?
I know, Jackie, there was a question emailed to us about the
Good.
balance of how to support a student on the schedule when there are parents who are working full time at home also.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what who the parent was or if they're here, but I just know that that was submitted since we sent the video. Like how are families supposed to balance the support at home when the parent and the student are working at the same time? Um, and I was thinking myself, like, that might be a good question to pose to our families. Like, what have some of our families done, over the spring, and how were they able to navigate working at home while having their child, online learning also?
I think that's brilliant. I would love if anybody could respond to that question, like what worked well for you and what areas it wasn't working and you need to figure something out. But if we're looking at the schedule, how, as parents, were you able to support, or what support did your kids need? How did you navigate working and having your kids at home for school? Anybody? Open. Especially families who might have been at IVA last year, how much support did your kids need?
Chandrika shared that both of us are at home. We set up a routine schedule, but I've also heard some parents are using learning pods.
I have heard that. There was a parent who emailed and said that supervision on Monday would be especially hard because there wasn't a structured class where the kid was with an adult during the day. And I think was suggesting that maybe we could support some sort of learning pod activity amongst our families. So this is a new idea. I think it is something that if we can, I'd like to support. I also know that there are some families that are hoping that their kids have all the same classes together. So like their families are like co-quarantining together. And so they want the same schedule so that the kids can be in the same class at the same time. And because we're a small school, I don't think that's something we can promise. We can hope it works that way. But I think that learning pods, like if you and someone who lives in your neighborhood, this is what my husband is hoping, that 2 days a week, the kids will be at someone else's house so he can have some space. And 2 days a week, he's going to have like twice the amount of kids at our house. And I think that that could be helpful even if they're in different classes, even if they're IVA students, but in different classes at the same time.
Julie shared, focusing on my work at home was really difficult. We'll have to try not to micromanage.
Yes. Yeah. In a normal setting, we ask our families to have like an apprenticeship model with their kids. And what we think of this as is your kid is growing towards independence. In high school, in college, if you email their teachers, it's like bad. But we're going from elementary school where it's like connected with the teacher and the parent at all times, to middle school where we're trying to say, okay, if your child is struggling in something, have them email their teacher. But you might have to say, open up an email right now. I will help you write it. You have to do an email. Otherwise, I will be emailing your teacher for you. So we want the students to try to reach out to even if you're like, they're struggling and they're not telling their teacher, if at all, if a parent can say, here, I'll teach you how to email your teacher. Let's do it right now. And we need to tell them that you're struggling. You can't do this on your own, and I'm not your teacher. I want you to be connected to your teacher. That sometimes we need our parents to tell us that they're struggling and that they're having a hard time reaching out. Our teachers really appreciate that. And if your child, here's a little like secret tip. It's not really secret, but if your child is struggling in all of their classes or in 3 of their classes or 4 of their classes, it's really a good idea to email all their teachers in the same email. Because then you can sort of describe the problem. You can ask, what have you been noticing? What supports do you suggest? Or you can say, one of the things that I know that works really well for my child is this. Can you help me understand how we can create this kind of support? So I imagine that we all know there's going to be some struggle heading into this year. Probably a lot for our students, and we're going to be on it. but especially for our 6th grade students, they're going to need their parents to pull them alongside and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to email your teacher, but instead of me doing it, I'm going to have you do it. Is there a way to request that our student be paired with a friend for at least one class? You can send in any of your requests and we can try to meet them to the best of our ability. Just send us your requests, no problem. But because we have such a strict schedule, small amount of students, we have to prioritize having teachers and students be able to have 6 classes together that match on their schedule before we prioritize friends. The second priority is that we make sure that students who need support services are in the schedule where they can get it. So connecting kids in classes with each other, that it needs to be the third priority for us, but it's something that we can try where there is flexibility.
I'd like to also add, Jackie, that usually at the beginning of the school year when working on schedules, we also look at sort of the male to female ratio and trying to have a balance with that also. And then we also look at like certain dynamics with students that we've been aware of from the previous year. So so those are things that we do. And I think, like you said, we start off with like, how does the structure, what's the best way for the students to meet the required needs, and then we sort of filter it down from there with everything else. But yes, I send in your requests.
Yeah, send them in.
I'd also like to add with that, Jackie, we haven't talked anything about a hybrid model,
Yeah.
but I also think it's important to know that, we do have a hybrid plan in place, and that should we ever feel it's appropriate to transition to that hybrid plan, the schedule will not be the same as our online learning. So there's going to be a shift of, the classes, and, if a student is in a certain class with, a certain student or a certain teacher now, it may not necessarily be the same should we go into a hybrid model. So
Yeah, so we're going to be really cautious in moving into a hybrid model because it would cause a huge disruption to the schedule, or we anticipate that it would, because we need to stagger start times, and so it'd be a great change. And then as a small school, the number of students that we need to, or teachers, that might like get a case of COVID and require the school to go into quarantine is very small. So we don't want to chance anything until we know that there is a lot of safety protocols in place. And any other questions? I think that it feels weird not having you in the same room. I want to hear more from you. And I think we'll move to sort of like our closing question to summarize our thinking. But I want to give a moment for any other questions that you have. Ah, good. Will there be a scheduled pickup day for any materials needed for students? Jordan, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Great question, BB. Thank you. We are going to have a day probably per grade is how we did in the spring. So each grade level would have a day that they have designated times to come and pick up materials. So we'll be sending out a survey this week to families to assess the needs of Chromebooks and novels. And then after we have all of that material and families have time to fill out the survey, then we'll go ahead and schedule days. So I imagine the week of the 24th, having days scheduled for families to come by and pick up materials.
Did you say that would also include their schedule? We want to make sure they get their materials, Chromebooks if they need them, their schedule, all at the same time. Craig, thank you for asking. There is a parent orientation on the calendar, and we do hope to have a Zoom version of this. So we had like this amazing idea to go to a park and have parents and distancing and have like a in-person new IVA parent or like any IVA parent mingle. And then we realized there's this sort of review that we do. If what we did, it's called above the fold. If what we did was reported in the newspaper, would it be above the fold? Would it be dangerous? Would we be like, you as a public school just met in person? So we were like, dang it, we cannot hold an in-person meeting. We want to so badly. But we will have some sort of a Zoom version. And I hope that because it's Zoom, we might be able to have teachers there or current IVA parents and breakout rooms so that you can really like talk with some parents. Please throw any other questions that you have. I'm taking us to our closing question though. What we do for our students in class that helps them sort of formalize their thinking, and we also do this at our parent meetings, we do this at our staff meetings, is ask you to just give a final thought. It does two things. It lets all of us know sort of how the room is thinking, but it also sort of crystallizes things for you. So can you choose one of these questions, and to the extent that you can, write it in the chat. From this conversation together, what have you realized? Or just what have you realized in general? What do you want to keep thinking or wondering about? And then what do you appreciate? So choose one of those, please. And we can add it to the chat, and then we'll read some of those.
And
Jackie,
there's one, oh, sorry, Miss.
no, go ahead, Jordan. I think you were going to say the same thing. I'll let you speak.
One more general question before we moved to the closing chat questions is, do you know if there's a PTA association meeting anytime soon?
Good question. Jenny, do you know? No, me neither.
I don't. It's I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm sure that as we get closer to the start, that Zena, who's our new PTA president for this incoming year, I'm sure she'll let everybody know. But as of right now, no, I don't have any information.
Right now on the calendar, we have back to school night and a PTA general meeting scheduled for September 16th. September 16th. That's
Okay.
3 weeks, the third week of school. So I think for the most part, we're trying to stick to dates on the calendar because they're spread out. And I think that the PTA would try to have that. If that adjusts, we will make sure to publish it as soon as we know. But closing questions, put your questions in the chat. Thank you for asking your questions today. What have you realized? What do you want to keep thinking about? We'll wait for, I'll stop talking for like a couple seconds while you guys are writing. Julia, you haven't said anything since you introduced yourself, but would you, maybe you and Amos, can you guys go back and forth and read our closing thoughts?
Sure. I'll start from Chandrika. I appreciate the simplicity of the online schedule. I'm all about routines with our son and streamlines how to structure his day and set up expectations. I also appreciate the one-pagers that outline the assignments for the week for all classes. They were very helpful in the spring.
Molly shared, I appreciate all of the hard work you have all put into this planning.
Julie, thanks for honoring our curiosity.
Jenny, I learned that PE is treated differently than other classes. Thank you for sharing that info. I didn't know, and it allows me to consider that in my planning for next year.
Craig, we appreciate this session. For sixth grade parents, the more information, the better. We also appreciate your taking our children's safety and the safety of the faculty and staff into consideration.
And I skipped over yours, Jackie. You wrote that my question that we'll be discussing in our upcoming professional development is how can we make sure we are providing ongoing and aware social and emotional support for our students?
And there's just one more from Chandrika. I wonder how this affects the transition to high school and the applying for different schools.
Yeah, really good question.
And then there's another one, BB. What I appreciated from this meeting is the connection IVA is trying to install with their students, making sure their mental wellness is also taken into consideration, keeping them accounted, and having such great planning set up for them. I love the idea of a weekly assignment outline.
Good, good. We really want to make things good for our parents. One thing that I realized last spring when we had a meeting like this is that I had some people in the meeting, and then after the meeting, they sent me their real questions. So you might not have actually asked the question that you wanted, especially because it's like in a group setting, but you are always welcome to send in your questions. I would encourage you to send all and any questions to info@ivalongbeach.org. That goes to our entire staff. If there's a question that's like just for me, often the questions that are for me are really for our counselor and I to discuss together. So send all your questions there if you didn't ask your real question. And if you come up with other questions, we really appreciate that you guys had the time to check in with us, and we really want to make the connections, especially for our new families, strong in like the most what I think, because this is my job and so I want to feel meaningful and purposeful, is like the most important years of an adolescent's life are these really beautiful and changing years of their middle school. So blessings upon all of you for having middle schoolers, and we're glad to be in community with you.
Jackie, can I add that we have another sort of forum on Thursday?
Yeah.
And it'll be the same format. So if you have additional questions that weren't answered here, or you just want to sit in and hear other questions, you can attend that one also. It's going to be Thursday in the afternoon, however, at 3 p.m., I believe, 3 to 4 p.m.
Yeah. And BB had one more question. And then Jordan or Julia, if you have any final thoughts. BB asked, when will our homeschool be informed of our withdrawal? So you do not have to tell your homeschool. It will help them to bring another person in, but they would not know that your child is attending IVA until after the first day. So in the state of California, a child can only attend one school. And so as soon as we claim they were in attendance at our school, it knocks off all the other spots they might have had, or vice versa. We're wondering if there are going to be some kids that just don't attend on our first day, and then we'll be calling our wait list as well. But if you are confident that you're coming to IVA, it's going to be good, you can call your school or email right now. But if you just want to like hold all options, then hold your options and attend on the first day to finalize your spot. You can also call them after the first day and let them know. They keep calling you. Of course they do. But, you know, everyone wants to know. You guys have a fantastic day. Thanks for joining us. Hope you have a good lunch and all of that. We hope to see you soon.
Everyone.
Bye, everybody.